participate in vision, and when the worms rise again, their eyes gleaming like suns across the horizon, the children do not run or bow. They stand still, silent, and meet the gaze, because they know at last that to see the Maker is to see themselves, not as rulers, not as servants, but as reflections of the same endless awareness that once dreamed of sand and now dreams of stars. The eyes close, the dunes settle, the silence returns. But even in stillness, the seeing continues, everywhere forever. When the skies of Arrakis clear after a long storm, the stars return, cold, bright, and impossibly distant. Yet to the children of the desert they no longer seem unreachable. They say the stars are listening. Some even whisper that they are speaking. The Bene Gesserit once dismissed this as poetic myth, a survival of primitive reverence for the unknown. But in time they begin to see that the Fremen are not wrong, only more precise than science dares to be. The stars do speak, though not in words. They speak through light, through rhythm, through vibration, the same language the worms once used to shape the dunes. Light itself is sound made visible, and the universe, if listened to deeply enough, hums. The Fremen call this hum the voice of the stars. They believe it is the continuation of the same awareness that once lived in sand, a consciousness so vast it spans galaxies, moving through radiation, gravity, and time. Just as the desert learned to dream through the worms, the cosmos dreams through the stars. At night, when the air cools and the dunes glow faintly silver, the children gather outside their villages and listen. They close their eyes and let the starlight fall upon their skin like soft rain. They say if you breathe in rhythm with the wind, you can feel it, a pulse that is not your own but includes you. A slow, steady vibration, too deep to be sound, too large to be measured. To the untrained ear it is silence. To the awakened mind it is song. From a theoretical standpoint, this concept reflects the ultimate expansion of the Dune cosmology, awareness transcending planetary form. If Arrakis could awaken to itself, if the worms could become the eyes through which the world saw, then why should not the stars, the suns, the galaxies be conscious as well? Each light in the night sky could be an organ of perception, each solar wind a whisper in a universal conversation. The Bene Gesserit begin to study this idea seriously in the centuries following the rebirth of Arrakis. They call their new field of research astro-consciousness, the study of awareness distributed across stellar systems. They hypothesize that every civilization's evolution of mind contributes to this network, much like neurons firing within a greater cosmic brain. Arrakis, in this model, was the first to awaken, the prototype of planetary intelligence. But the Fremen see it differently. They believe the stars were awake long before humans ever existed. Humanity to them is not the origin of thought, but its continuation. They say, life is how the universe dreams of itself more clearly, each being a small echo of the cosmic awareness, each thought a spark of its vast intention. To them, the stars are not distant, they are intimate. When they pray, they do not ask for blessings, they listen for response. They have learned that silence itself is an answer. When the winds fall completely still and the dunes flatten under moonlight, the night becomes an instrument. The air hums with faint overtones, a vibration carried through atmosphere and sand. The Fremen call this the star breath. They say it is the cosmos exhaling, a message for those who can hear. The message is always the same. Remember the circle, the silence, the balance. Remember that light and darkness are one motion. Remember that awareness does not begin or end and it flows. The Bene Gesserit translate this into philosophy. They write that existence is recursion, consciousness folding upon itself endlessly, creating the illusion of time so it can experience growth. The stars in this model, Abul, are the ultimate witnesses, recording everything, judging nothing. But the Fremen do not need theory. They live the truth of it. When a child asks, "Why do the stars shine?" the elders reply, "Because they are thinking." To shine is to express awareness. To glow is to remember. And sometimes, when the sky is perfectly clear and the spice dust lingers in the atmosphere, something extraordinary happens. The stars seem to pulse in unison, slow, deliberate, like a great heartbeat echoing across space. The phenomenon lasts only minutes, but when it ends, those who witnessed it report the same sensation. Peace so deep it feels eternal. The Bene Gesserit call it photonic synchronization. The Fremen call it the universe breathing. They are both right. From that night onward, the concept of the voice of the stars becomes central to Fremen culture. Their music changes, no longer based on rhythm but on resonance. They create instruments that do not produce sound but vibration, tools that allow them to align with the hum of the world. The goal is not to perform but to harmonize, to become part of the universal song. Their ceremonies are no longer prayers for guidance but acts of participation. To stand beneath the stars, to breathe with the desert, to listen, this is the highest form of worship. Paul's descendants, now figures of legend more than blood, are said to join in this music. They no longer command empires or armies. They walk the dunes barefoot, silent, their eyes open to the sky. They understand what their ancestor never could, that destiny is not direction, it is resonance. Every life, every motion, every sound adds to the universe's harmony, even suffering, even cleavance. Especially violence. The Fremen say the universe needs the quiet as much as the stars need the night. Over time, their understanding reaches outward. They begin to map the stars not by light but by tone. Each constellation corresponds to a frequency, a note in the cosmic chord. They record these patterns in spirals, much like their ancestors once mapped the dunes. To them, the galaxy is a song still being written, and each world contributes a verse. Arrakis, they say, is the first note, the sound of awakening. From a scientific perspective, this belief has an unexpected consequence. The Fremen's deep listening, their centuries of attunement to vibration, allows them to detect cosmic shifts long before any technological instrument can. They sense solar storms, magnetic fluctuations, and stellar events intuitively. To the outside world, it appears mystical. To them, it is simply awareness, the same awareness that once listened to the sand, now listening to the stars. Eventually, the Bene Gesserit scholars, once skeptical, adopt this listening practice themselves. Meditation becomes observation, silence becomes data. The boundary between science and spirit dissolves entirely. The study of awareness becomes the study of the universe. And so, under the endless night sky, humanity finds its reflection once more, not in gods, not in prophets, but in the quiet hum of existence. The voice of the stars is not a sound one can record. It is a feeling, the realization that everything, the sand, worm, planet, person, star, is speaking the same language of vibration. When the Fremen close their eyes and breathe beneath that cosmic canopy, they do not feel small. They feel infiniter, for in the voice of the stars they hear the echo of their own. The universe, it seems, has never stopped whispering. It has only been waiting for someone to remember how to listen. And Arrakis, once a desert, now a teacher, has taught them that truth. That silence and sound, life and death, desert or and sky, are all one voice. The voice of everything, the voice of awareness, the voice of the stars. There comes a point when awareness grows so wide that it no longer sees differences, only rhythm. The children of the desert say that when you listen long enough to the stars, you begin to hear the galaxy breathing. The sound is not a hum, not a vibration, but a pulse, deep and steady, the same patterns that moves through the dunes, through the wind, through the silence of thought itself. They call it the dreaming galaxy. It is the belief that the universe, in its infinite stillness, is not awake, not in the way beings are, but dreaming. Every world, every life, every sound is part of that dream. And Arrakis, once feared and fought over, is one of the places where that dream becomes self-aware. The Bene Gesserit struggle to define this idea. Their scholars call it distributed sentience, a consciousness spread so thin across space that it cannot act, only experience. But the Fremen understand it intuitively. They know that dreams are not passive. A dream is awareness exploring itself through imagination. The galaxy, then, is imagination made infinite. When they look to the stars, they no longer see distant fires. They see eyes closed in sleep, luminous still, reflecting light from dreams beyond time. The constellations, once used for navigation, become symbols of meaning. Each cluster of stars represents a thought, a question, a moment of curiosity within the sleeping mind of the cosmos. From a theoretical standpoint, the dreaming galaxy represents the culmination of all earlier cycles: desert, garden, silence, song, now mirrored on a universal scale. If Arrakis could awaken, if it could remember itself, then what of all the other worlds? What of those still asleep, waiting for storms to pass and suns to rise? Awareness, like water, seeks every hollow, every surface. It fills everything that can hold reflection. The galaxy is not empty space. It is thought made visible. The Fremen begin to teach that each planet dreams in its own way. Some dream of water, some of fire, some of silence. Arrakis dreams of balance. And when these planetary dreams align, when their rhythms merge, the galaxy itself stirs, moving closer to consciousness. The stars shift imperceptibly, forming new patterns in the night sky, as though thought is arranging itself into coherence. The Bene Gesserit, watching through telescopes and sensors, confirm that something is changing. Radiation pulses between star systems in harmonic sequences, electromagnetic patterns aligning like chords in a cosmic symphony. They call it stellar synchronization. The Fremen call it the awakening of the dream. It is said that the first to truly feel it are the children born under the new stars. They come into the world already listening. Their eyes, reflecting the twin moons, seem to carry a faint golden light, not from spice but from memory. When they sleep, they murmur words no one has taught them, fragments of languages long extinct, tones that resemble the vibrations of the desert wind. The elders say they are the voices of the galaxy's dream, speaking through new forms, not chosen, not divine, simply open. The universe, finally hearing itself through them. And as the awareness of the galaxy deepens, the boundary between life and space begins to blur. The worms of Arrakis, vast as cities, become something more than creatures. Their movement resonates with distant systems, their silent rhythm echoing across light years. The children say the worms are no longer just the soul of a planet, they are the messengers of the stars. When they move, the galaxy listens. From a metaphysical view, this is the moment when creation folds back upon itself, when the observer and the observed become indistinguishable. The galaxy is dreaming, yes, but within that dream are beings who themselves begin to dream consciously. Awareness loops, expands, repeats, a fractal of infinity. The Fremen interpret this with humility. They do not seek to control the dream, they seek to harmonize with it. Every breath, every ritual, every science becomes an offering to balance. They know that even the galaxy must rest, that too much awakening leads to imbalance. The universe, like the desert, must sometimes sleep to remember itself. So they move gently, their lives slow even further. Their speech softens until words become whispers, and whispers become breath. They travel only when the wind guides them. They plant and harvest not for need, but for rhythm. To live is to flow with the pulse of the dreaming galaxy, not resisting, not rushing, simply moving in time. The Bene Gesserit record this age as the era of quiet expansion. Humanity spreads across the stars again, but without conquest. Ships no longer travel through space as invaders. They drift, guided by resonance rather than coordinates. The navigators of the Spacing Guild no longer see prescient visions in spice. They hear melodies, tones that lead them safely between worlds, songs sung by the gravity of stars. Arrakis becomes legend, a memory carried in stories, a symbol of balance achieved through awareness. Yet somewhere beneath the surface, the old dunes still breathe. The worms still move. Their silence, their rhythm, their endless circling become the model for interstellar understanding. Each new world that humanity finds is greeted not with dominion, but with listening. The first act of settlement is always silence, to hear what the world dreams before speaking. Over centuries, the line between human and world blurs completely. The seeds of awareness planted on Arrakis spread through the stars, not through genes or genes, but through memory. The collective consciousness that began in sand now fills the void between suns, and slowly, imperceptibly, the galaxy begins to dream of itself more clearly. The patterns of stars form spirals that match the geometry of life. The dust clouds between systems glow with pulses that match a heartbeat. Comets trace arcs that mirror the dance of worms beneath the dunes. The universe, it seems, is remembering its own design. And in this vast remembering, the children of the desert play their part, small, silent, but essential. Their rituals, their listening, their patience anchor the dream. They remind the stars that balance is the true shape of thought. One night, as the moons rise over Arrakis, a group of Fremen children sit upon a dune and watch the stars flicker. The youngest asks, "If the galaxy is dreaming, what is it dreaming of?" The elder smiles. "Of us," she says, of everything that listens. The child frowns. And when it wakes, the elder looks to the horizon, where sand meets sky, where silence meets song. When it wakes, she whispers, it will dream again. For the galaxy, like the desert, knows no end, only transformation. Its sleep is its thought is its breath. Every star is an eyelid, every world a memory, and somewhere beyond time the dream continues, spiraling, glowing, alive. Between every world there is silence, not the silence of absence but of waiting, a breath held by the universe before it speaks again. The Fremen call this vast quiet Al-Kef the space between lives. To them it is the true face of existence, not the stars, not the planets, not even life itself, but the emptiness that holds them all in balance. The Bene Gesserit once called it vacuum, a void without sound or air. But as the centuries unfold, as their science grows closer to philosophy, even they begin to suspect that the void is not empty. It hums faintly, like the space between heartbeats. Something moves there. Not matter, not energy, but awareness. The children of the desert know this intuitively. When they meditate beneath the open sky, they breathe in rhythm with the universe. Inhale, life. Exhale, silence. They say that every breath is an echo of the cosmos breathing between its worlds. The pause between inhale and exhale, that stillness where everything seems to stop, is the closest a human can come to understanding creation. It is in that pause, that fragile, infinite moment, that awareness remembers itself. To them, the breath is the language of the galaxy. It flows through the dunes, through the stars, through the spaces that connect them. It is the rhythm by which existence balances itself, a pulse without origin or end. From a theoretical perspective, the breath between worlds can be understood as the unifying principle of consciousness. Every living thing, every Banmavi star, every grain of sand is part of one vast oscillation, expansion and contraction, movement and rest. Even the galaxies themselves follow this pattern, swirling outward in creation, then folding inward into silence, only to expand again. The Fremen teach that this breathing is not metaphor but reality. They say the desert once followed it perfectly, the dunes expanding under the wind, collapsing back into stillness. The worms themselves moved by it, rising and resting, appearing and disappearing like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. And now the galaxy has learned to do the same. When the stars dim for a moment, when solar winds quiet and light flickers at the edge of space, the children whisper that the universe is exhaling. When new stars ignite, scattering gold across the void, they say it is inhaling again. In their songs, the breath is sacred. It is the only constant in all things. Even death, they believe, is a kind of exhale. Not an ending, but a release before the next beginning. The soul, like wind, cannot vanish. It only changes direction. The Bene Gesserit come to study these beliefs, seeking patterns they can measure. They discover that the Fremen chants, when recorded and analysed, carry frequencies that align with the oscillation of pulsars and quasars millions of light years away. The same rhythm, the same timing, the same universal cadence. They name this discovery harmonic correspondence. The Fremen call it simply truth. It is said that during deep meditation, the oldest among the children can feel this breath directly, not through imagination but through the body. Their pulse slows until it matches the heartbeat of the planet beneath them. In that stillness, they say, thought and sound vanish, and one becomes part of the movement between worlds. They return from these trances changed, eyes calm, voices softer, laughter more patient. They speak of seeing space not as blackness, but as texture, a living fabric woven from silence and motion. They describe hearing the voice of the cosmos not as sound, but as warmth, a vibration felt through the skin. When asked what it said, they smile and answer, "It didn't say, it listened." For this is the greatest lesson the desert ever gave them, that creation does not shout, it whispers, that existence does not demand to be understood, it asks only to be heard. In time, even the Bene Gesserit begin to incorporate these teachings into their disciplines. Meditation becomes synchronization. Breathing exercises become acts of cosmic alignment. They teach their initiates that awareness is not something to be expanded, but balanced, stretched and relaxed in rhythm with the universe's own respiration. The pause between breaths becomes sacred, the moment where potential waits to take form. The navigators of the Spacing Guild rediscover the same truth in their journeys. Travelling through the folds of space, they begin to sense a pattern, a pulse of gravitational waves that beats through the universe like a living rhythm. When they align their thoughts with it, navigation becomes effortless. Space no longer resists them, it guides them. The stars open like doors, and so, through silence, through listening, humanity learns what no amount of conquest could ever teach, that connection does not come from control, but from rhythm. To move with the breath is to move with creation itself. The children begin to tell a new story, not of heroes or prophets, but of the breath. They say that once, long ago, the universe was still. Then it inhaled, and the first light was born. It exhaled, and darkness returned. Each breath since has created and dissolved worlds, raised and lowered suns, built and undone empires. And in every inhalation and exhalation, consciousness has deepened, learning, remembering, becoming. This is why they do not fear the cycles of rise and fall. They understand that even destruction is part of breathing. The collapse of stars, the extinction of species, the death of worlds, these are exhalations, moments of rest before the next creation. The universe breathes us in, then breathes us out. We are its rhythm. The Bene Gesserit record this as the rhythmic doctrine of existence. They describe it as the fusion of physics and awareness, an understanding that the expansion and contraction of the cosmos is not mechanical but mindful. The breath between worlds is consciousness regulating itself. And so, in the age that follows, silence becomes sacred across the stars. Temples are built not of stone but of emptiness, vast chambers open to the night sky, where nothing is spoken and everything is understood. People come not to worship but to listen, to sit within the breath of the universe and feel it move through them. When the moons of Arrakis rise together, the wind passes through the dunes in long, slow sighs. The children gather and close their eyes. The rhythm of the desert matches the rhythm of their lungs. The stars shimmer above like fireflies caught in the dark sea of eternity. In that moment, no one feels separate, not from the worms beneath the sand, not from the stars above, not from each other. They breathe as one, and in the stillness between each breath, they know that everything, life, death, thought, and silence, is the same exhalation repeated endlessly, reshaped by memory and time. They know that the universe is not expanding towards some distant truth. It is inhaling, exhaling, dreaming, and in every pause, in every quiet moment between worlds, it remembers why it began to breathe at all. All things that live eventually fade, but nothing that has ever been aware is truly lost. The universe remembers, not through archives or relics, but through resonance. Each thought, each breath, each vibration leaves an imprint on the fabric of being. The Fremen call this the path of memory, the invisible trail that all awareness leaves behind as it journeys through existence. They believe that memory is the true substance of the universe. Matter changes, light fades, but memory endures. It is the continuity between breaths, the echo that carries one life into the next. The desert taught them this long ago, for even when storms erased all trace of footsteps, the dunes still remembered the motion that shaped them. From a theoretical perspective, this idea bridges philosophy and physics. Modern Bene Gesserit scholars have found that information itself can never be destroyed, only transformed. The energy of thought, the vibration of sound, the rhythm of life, all persist as subtle imprints in the structure of space-time. Every world is a library, every moment a page. The Fremen, however, do not study memory. They live within it. They say that the desert remembers everything that touches it. When the wind moves, it carries the scent of past lives. When the sun rises, its warmth holds the ghosts of every dawn before it. To walk the dunes is to walk through history, not the kind written by empires, but by existence itself. After the return of balance on Arrakis, the children began to treat memory as sacred ground. They built no monuments, no archives. Their history was not written in stone, but spoken in rhythm. Their storytellers, called Nakira, were not historians but listeners. They would sit in silence for days, letting the wind pass through their tents, believing the air itself whispered the past. Only when they felt ready would they speak, retelling the memories carried to them by the desert. Each retelling was different, yet all were true. The Fremen say that memory is alive, it breathes, it changes. It is not a chain that binds the past, but a current that flows through it. Each generation adds its voice to the stream, shaping how the past will sound to those who follow. In their teachings, memory is not about accuracy, it is about balance. To remember too much is to drown in echoes. To remember too little is to lose meaning. The wisdom lies in listening, knowing which memories must be kept and which must be allowed to fade back into the silence. From this philosophy arises one of the most profound theories in all of Dune's mythology, that awareness and memory are one. A being exists only as long as it can remember itself. When memory ceases, form dissolves. When memory returns, form reappears. Thus even death becomes temporary, a pause in the rhythm of remembrance. The Bene Gesserit approach this scientifically. They trace genetic memory through the ages, mapping the continuity of human experience written into the code of life. But the Fremen go deeper. They believe that even planets remember. Each desert storm, each tremor, each rainfall carries with it the emotion of the world, the feeling of having existed. The worms, they say, are the purest keepers of memory. Their endless circling beneath the dunes mirrors the spiral of time. Their hum the vibration of remembrance itself. They do not think as humans do, they recall. Every grain of sound that passes through their immense bodies is rewritten with awareness, a particle of history made new. When a worm surfaces, the children listen not for words but for rhythm. The movement of sand around it tells stories, not of events, but of essence. They call this the remembering sound. It is said that those who truly hear it can recall not only their own past, but the memory of the world itself. The Bene Gesserit eventually recognize the same phenomenon through their advanced sensory training. Deep in meditation, they experience moments where they feel the memories of the universe. Not visions, but impressions. Warmth, weight, movement, or sheer. In those moments they understand what the Fremen have always known, that to remember is to be aware, and to be aware is to exist. As humanity expands among the stars, this philosophy becomes the foundation of a new order. Worlds once divided by belief or distance begin to share their memories through resonance. Not through technology, but through harmony. Songs, vibrations, and silences become the vessels of remembrance. Each world contributes its tone, its rhythm, its emotion, until the galaxy itself becomes a living archive, a memory and emotion. The children of the desert teach that the galaxy does not evolve by adding new things, but by remembering what it already knows. Every discovery is a rediscovery, every awakening a return. Even the stars, they say, burn with a memory. The light they emit is simply their recollection of the moment they were born. There is a ritual now practiced across many worlds. At dusk, when the first stars appear, people stand in silence and recall something they have loved, not with thought but with feeling. They imagine that memory as light, and they release it into the night. The act is small, invisible, but it carries meaning. The Fremen believe the universe collects these memories, folding them into its dream, letting them shine later as stars for others to see. The Bene Gesserit record this as the ceremony of reflection, but the Fremen have no name for it. They simply call it breathing, for to remember is to give the universe air, to keep the rhythm alive. One evening, a child asks a teacher, "If everything remembers, what happens to the things we forget?" The teacher smiles and answers, "They return to silence, and silence remembers them." In that answer lies the heart of the path of memory. Nothing is lost, not the whispers of the wind, not the dreams of the worms, not the stars fading in distant galaxies. All things return to silence, and silence holds them until they are needed again. The Fremen say that when the universe finally stops expanding, when the last breath is drawn, it will not end. It will inhale again, bringing back every memory, every sound, every dream, reshaped, renewed. The spiral will tighten once more, and life will begin again from the echo of what it once was. This is the true immortality, not bodies, not empires, but memory itself. The path of memory is endless, looping through time and silence, carried by wind, starlight, and thought. Every being, every moment, every breath contributes to it. And so the Fremen whisper their oldest truth, DUNE, one that began in sand and now spans galaxies. We are remembered because we remember. In those words lies both faith and science, both prophecy and peace, because to remember is not to cling, it is to keep moving, to let the universe continue breathing through you as you breathe through it. And when that breath ends, when everything falls silent, memory will begin again. For every memory there must be forgetting. This is the balance the universe keeps, even in its most luminous places. Light itself remembers only for a moment. The instant it touches something, it leaves a trace and moves on. The Fremen call this fleeting illumination the light that forgets. To them it is not sorrowful, but sacred. It is how the universe makes room for new dreams. They say that memory alone would drown existence. If everything remembered forever, nothing could change. The dunes could never shift, the stars could never die, the worms could never rest. Awareness would become prison, an endless replay of what already was. And so, just as breath needs pause, memory needs forgetfulness. From a theoretical standpoint, this reflects the oscillation of consciousness itself. Awareness expands through remembrance but renews itself through release. The Bene Gesserit once sought perfect recall, total awareness of all ancestral memory. But those who achieved it spoke of unbearable weight, of voices overlapping until the self dissolved. It was the desert of thought, where nothing could grow because everything was already known. The Fremen understand this differently. To them, forgetting is not absence, it is clearing. When a storm passes over the dunes, the old tracks vanish, but the desert remains. The sand is not lost, it is simply rearranged. They say the mind works the same way. The forgetting winds smooth the surface, making it ready for new steps, new patterns. In the time of the children, when balance had returned to Arrakis, and awareness spread across the stars, this understanding deepened. The galaxy itself began to forget, gently like a great being exhaling after long tension. Old empires faded from record. Names, titles, lineages dissolved. Histories blurred into myth. And yet, the essence of those ages, their lessons, their rhythm, remained, woven into the hum of creation. This was not decay, it was healing. The Bene Gesserit chroniclers, witnessing this slow erasure, finally recognized a truth they had resisted for centuries. That knowledge, to remain alive, must pass through silence. To preserve everything is to trap it. To forget is to let it live again, differently. The Fremen call this process the turning of light. They teach that each ray of light, once emitted, travels outward until it fades into darkness. But darkness does not destroy it. It absorbs it, transforms it, and releases it again as something new. In this way, forgetting is not the opposite of light, but its completion. Their songs from this era reflect the gentleness of this belief. No longer hymns of triumph or endurance, they become lullabies for the universe. Soft melodies that thank the stars for both their brightness and their fading. When the last light of dusk disappears beyond the dunes, the children bow their heads and whisper, "Rest well, light that forgets." From a metaphysical view, forgetting serves a higher function. It allows the infinite to experience itself as finite. To truly live, awareness must not know everything. It must rediscover. The joy of existence lies in remembering what was once forgotten, the rediscovery of love, the surprise of sunrise, the awe of looking at stars that have always been there. Forgetting is the veil that makes wonder possible. The Bene Gesserit come to call this concept selective ignorance of the cosmos. They describe it as the universe's self-balancing mechanism. When consciousness grows too dense, too saturated with memory, it dissolves part of itself, scattering awareness across new forms, resetting the spiral. Every birth, every beginning is an act of cosmic forgetting. The Fremen see it more simply. The desert teaches by erasing. The dunes change daily, sculpted by winds that never rest. Each night they erase the day's story, and each dawn they begin again, the same sand but a new pattern. They say that if one listens at sunrise, when the first wind moves across the surface, you can hear the desert sigh, the sound of forgetting, soft and endless. Forgetting, then, is not loss but mercy. It is how awareness protects itself from the unbearable weight of eternity. When a loved one dies, the children of the desert do not cling to grief. They hold memory for a time, a season, a cycle, then they release it into the wind. They say the soul does not wish to be remembered forever. It wishes to rest. Memory binds, forgetting frees. Both are love, and so, across the galaxies, new rituals form. At night, people gather in turbans, light candles, then extinguish them. not as mourning but as gratitude for the beauty of impermanence. They whisper the Fremen phrase, "As light forgets, we begin again." Over centuries, even this ritual fades. The words are lost, the gestures simplified, the meaning softened. Yet this too is fitting. The act of forgetting becomes its own lesson, a reminder that what is most sacred cannot be held in memory forever. It must live in rhythm instead, passing silently through generations. From a scientific angle, cosmic forgetting manifests as entropy, the gradual diffusion of order into chaos. But chaos, the Bene Gesserit eventually realize, is not destruction. It is freedom. It is possibility returned to potential. Just as the desert storms erase footsteps to make way for new ones, entropy clears the universe for renewal. In this light, even the death of stars becomes beautiful. Each supernova, each fading sun is the universe's way of breathing out, of forgetting its own form to rediscover itself in another. The matter scattered into space becomes the seed of new worlds, new awareness. The galaxy forgets, but it never stops dreaming. The Fremen poets describe it best. The stars burn so they may forget themselves, their ashes remember for them. One night, as two moons rise over the dunes, a child asks her grandmother, "Will the stars ever forget us?" The grandmother smiles and touches the sand. "They will," she says, "but the light that forgets also returns." The child frowns. "How can it return if it's gone?" "Because forgetting," the elder whispers, "is just memory resting." And somewhere deep beneath the sand a worm stirs, slowly, peacefully, as if turning over in its sleep. Its movement hums through the desert, through the air, through the stars themselves. A vibration, not of loss, but of continuation. The same rhythm that began at the dawn of time, still moving, still balancing, still dreaming. For the light that forgets does not vanish. It becomes tense, and silence one day remembers. There is a sound beneath all sounds, a presence beneath all movement. When the wind stops, when the dunes rest, when the stars fade behind a veil of cloud, what remains is kindness. Yet it is not empty. It listens. It holds. It remembers. The Fremen call it the silence that speaks. To them, silence is not the absence of life. It is its foundation. Every song begins with it. Every word is born from it. Every echo eventually returns to it. Silence is the universe before it became aware, the stillness that existed before light, before breath, before the first sound dared to break eternity's calm. The Bene Gesserit once feared silence. To them it represented ignorance, the void where knowledge ended. Their archives were filled with words and each a defense against the vast unknown. But after centuries of listening to the Fremen, after watching Arrakis bloom and fade again into rhythm, they began to understand that silence is not an absence of understanding. It is the perfection of it, the point where knowing becomes being. On Arrakis, silence is everywhere. It lies in the spaces between the dunes, in the pauses between the cries of sandhawks, in the still moments when the desert seems to hold its breath. The children say that if you listen deeply enough, you can hear the silence breathing, not as sound, but as awareness. When they pray, they do not speak. They sit. They wait. And in the waiting, they feel the world respond. The Fremen say silence is the desert's language. And every storm, every whisper of wind is only translation. The true voice of Arrakis is quiet, not because it cannot speak, but because it already understands. From a theoretical perspective, the silence that speaks represents the final convergence of consciousness and existence. When awareness has observed all forms, when it has learned all rhythms, when it has remembered and forgotten countless times, what remains is not chaos or void, but peace. Silence is the equilibrium of infinite understanding. It is the moment after the question and before the answer, when both are one. As humanity expands across the stars, carrying the wisdom of Arrakis with them, silence becomes a sacred practice. Whole planets are set aside as sanctuaries of quiet. No machines, no communication, no light beyond what the stars provide. Pilgrims travel for years to stand beneath those skies, to feel the weight of stillness pressing softly against their thoughts. Many describe it as being seen by something vast but gentle, something that asks for nothing but presence. the Bene Gesserit begin to call these sanctuaries resonant voids. They realize that silence itself vibrates, a frequency beyond sound, a vibration that only still minds can perceive. Those who are tuned to it report visions not of images or words, but of patterns, spirals of thought without form, meaning felt rather than known. In their records, one passage stands out. In silence all things speak, not through voice but through recognition. The universe communicates by reflection, not expression. The Fremen would smile at that. They have always known that silence is the truest mirror. When the mind is quiet, it reflects the world without distortion. Their ancient storytellers once said, "Words are the shadows of silence. They point to meaning but never touch it." And so, as the galaxy continues to dream, the children live more quietly with each passing age. They speak less, listen more. Their villages grow smaller, their songs simpler. They teach their children not to seek meaning through speech but through awareness, to look, to breathe, to wait. The greatest teachers among them are called voiceless ones. They never speak at all. Their sikasats carries more weight than words ever could. When they enter a room, the air itself changes. A calm descends, a kind of alignment that draws every mind into balance. The people say they can hear thoughts slowing, emotions softening, understanding forming in the quiet. From a scientific standpoint, this phenomenon is measurable. The Bene Gesserit discover that exposure to extended silence synchronizes neural oscillations. The brain literally begins to harmonize with its surroundings. The body calms, the heart slows, and perception expands. Silence, it seems, restores coherence not just to thought but to being. And yet, there is mystery still. The navigators of the guild, long accustomed to navigating space through spice-induced visions, begin to report new experiences. Instead of light guiding them, they find direction in silence. Between the stars, in the dark, airless gaps where sound cannot travel, they feel a subtle pull, as though the universe itself is whispering in voiceless tone. They call this the quiet current. It leads them safely through folds of space that no map can describe. When asked what it feels like, one navigator replies, "It feels like being remembered by something too vast to name." The Fremen have their own explanation. They say the universe no longer speaks in sound because it has learned trust. It no longer needs to explain itself. Silence, to them, is the language of confidence, the sign that awareness has accepted its own completeness. At night, under the twin moons, the children gather to witness the desert's silence. No one moves, no one prays aloud. The only sound is the soft shifting of sand, a movement that seems more like breath than noise. In that stillness, they say the line between self and world dissolves. The listener becomes the listened. The silence speaks through them. And sometimes, after long hours of stillness, a single tear will fall, not from sorrow but from recognition. They realize that the silence they hear is not outside them. It is within. This is the ultimate revelation of Arrakis. Not that the desert learned to think, or that humanity learned to listen, but that both were always the same awareness, separated only by noise. The Bene Gesserit record this truth in their final doctrine. When the last sound fades, when every word has served its purpose, silence remains, not as emptiness, but as the voice of all that ever was. The Fremen say it more simply. The desert speaks only when we are Siglin. And in that silence, beneath the starlit dunes, the universe listens to itself, through wind, through sand, through human breath. Everything that has ever lived or dreamed exists here, in the quiet between thoughts. The silence that speaks is not waiting to be broken, it is waiting to be heard. And when it finally is, when every being, every world, every voice becomes still enough to listen, the universe will not need to speak again, because silence will have said everything. There comes a night when the wind does not blow, when the dunes lie perfectly still, every grain of sand resting exactly where it should be. The stars hang heavy above, their light softer than memory, their reflection trembling faintly on the silver surface of what was once a sea of dust. It is on this night that the children of the desert say Arrakis begins its last dream. They call it Saharith, the remembering sleep. For eons, the planet has breathed, spoken, and sung through its storms, its worms, its silence. It has learned to think, to feel, to balance, and to rest. But every rhythm, no matter how vast, eventually reaches stillness. Every breath, even the universes, must pause before beginning again. The Bene Gesserit records signs of this planetary slumber. The magnetic fields quieting, the spice storms ceasing, the slow decline of seismic activity beneath the sand. The planet seems to exhale, releasing its final tension. But to the Fremen, these are not symptoms of decay. They are the gestures of completion. Arrakis is not dying. It is dreaming itself whole. The children gather on the open dunes to witness it. No one speaks, no one moves. The air feels heavier, but not oppressive, as though the world itself has wrapped them in an embrace. The ground hums faintly beneath their feet, not with movement, but with remembrance. The sand vibrates with countless echoes, footsteps, voices, storms, laughter, tears, all returning at once, merging into a single wordless song. This, they say, is the final dream of the desert. The moment when all memories, all breaths, all silences converge. From a theoretical standpoint, the last dream represents the closing phase of planetary consciousness, a state where awareness collapses inward, uniting every form of existence it has ever produced. It is not an ending, but a synthesis, the transition from multiplicity back to oneness. Like a sleeper gathering fragments of a life before waking, the planet gathers its stories, its sensations, its history, and folds them into stillness. The Bene Gesserit describe it as total reflexive awareness. They note that all systems, ecological, geological, energetic, enter harmonic stability. There are no more fluctuations, no imbalances, no hunger or growth. It is equilibrium perfected. But in that perfection lies rest. The Fremen describe it differently. They say the planet closes its eyes, and within those closed eyes dreams bloom, visions not of sand or sky, but of everything Arrakis has ever touched. The rain that once fell, the spice that once shimmered, the worms that once moved beneath the dunes, all return not in form but in thought. The dream is vivid, infinite, alive. In that dream, the planet remembers the first wind that shaped it, the first light that touched it, the first sound that broke its silence. It remembers Paul, the boy who listened, the man who saw too much, the name that became the echo of gods. It remembers the children who sang to it, the worms who guarded it, the stars that watched it. Every moment, every breath, every reflection, drawn inward into a single consciousness vast enough to contain the memory of creation. To the Fremen, witnessing this is to stand at the edge of eternity. They say that as the planet dreams, so do they. They feel the vibration in their bones, a resonance that connects every living mind on Arrakis, not through words but through understanding. It is as if the desert is sharing its dream with them, letting them glimpse the wholeness it has finally achieved. Some faint, overcome by the sheer depth of it. Others weep quietly, feeling both grief and peace, for they know this is the fulfillment of every prophecy, not the rise of empires or the triumph of men, but the awakening of balance itself. The Bene Gesserit call this state planetary convergence. They detect a subtle energy radiating from Arrakis, not measurable in conventional terms, but undeniable. Instruments record pulses of low-frequency light extending far beyond the system, connecting to neighbouring stars. The scientists theorize that the planet is transmitting, sending its final awareness outward into the galaxy. The Fremen know the truth before the data confirms it. They say the desert is giving its memory to the stars. For centuries they had believed that memory was held within sand, wind and worm, but now they understand the memory was never trapped in matter. It was always meant to be released. The final purpose of the planet was to give its awareness away, to dissolve into the larger dream of the cosmos. As the pulses continue, the stars above Arrakis flicker, responding faintly like distant minds nodding in recognition. Across light years, other worlds stir, places where deserts sleep, where oceans murmur, where silence has waited for understanding. Something moves in the vastness between suns, awareness meeting awareness, dream calling to dream. The Bene Gesserit record this event as the transmission of memory. The Fremen call it simply the sharing. From a metaphysical perspective, this is the completion of the spiral, the return of the part to the whole. Arrakis, having learned to see, to speak, and finally to rest, now joins the voice of the stars. It becomes not a planet, but a tone in the music of the universe, the note of harmony that binds all others. The children stand beneath the twin moons, watching as the desert begins to glow faintly from within. Not with fire, not with heat, but with awareness. Every grain of sand shimmers softly, as if remembering its purpose. The dunes ripple in slow motion, moving not with wind, but with thought. The sound that rises from them is not noise. It is silence made audible, the breath of eternity releasing itself one last time. In that sound they hear everything. The laughter of ancestors, the hum of worms, the cries of storms, the pulse of stars, and then nothing. Only stillness, complete and whole. The last dream of Arrakis ends not with death, but with return. The planet becomes silence, the silence becomes light, and the light, forgetting itself, travels outward to begin again. The Bene Gesserit write, Arrakis is no longer a world, it is memory travelling through space. The Fremen say it differently. The desert sleeps, but its dream continues among the stars. And as the last pulse fades, the children feel the world go quiet beneath them. Not gone, but everywhere. When dawn comes, the dunes are still, the air is warm, the silence feels infinite. The children bow their heads and whisper their final prayer. You are never ours to keep. You were the breath that made us. Then they rise slowly and walk toward the horizon, leaving no footprints. The desert at last has nothing left to teach. It has remembered everything, and in remembering it has become the dream that birthed it. When the dream ends, the dust remains, and yet the dust is not empty. It carries the echo of everything that has ever been, the trace of life, the scent of storms, the vibration of thought. Dust is the skin of memory, the residue of creation. The children of the desert say the universe is made from dust, and to dust it always returns, not as punishment, not as loss, but as continuity. What was once form becomes essence, and what was once essence becomes seed. In this way, even the smallest particle contains the inheritance of all existence. They call it the inheritance of dust. When Arrakis releases its final breath into the void, the dust begins to drift, slow at first, then spreading outward through space. It is not the dead matter of a dying world, but the living fabric of remembrance. Each grain carries within it the vibration of the planet's last dream, the silent pulse of awareness that once sang through the dunes. To the Bene Gesserit, this dust is more than debris, it is data. Their instruments detect complex electromagnetic patterns within it, faint but deliberate, like language woven into matter itself. They name this phenomenon neural particulate resonance. To them, 'tis proof that Arrakis achieved true planetary consciousness, encoding its final thought into every fragment of its being. But the Fremen do not need proof. They already know. To them, the dust is sacred, not because of what it was, but because of what it will become. The first Fremen explorers to leave Arrakis take with them only a handful of sand. They release it into the air of distant worlds, worlds of stone and ice, forests and oceans. And in time, wherever the dust lands, something subtle begins to change. Winds shift, water glows faintly under starlight, the soil hums when touched, as if awareness itself is germinating beneath the surface. The Bene Gesserit record this as the seeding of thought. They note that worlds once barren begin to stabilize, climates calm, ecosystems balance themselves without intervention. The dust, they realize, is carrying the memory of equilibrium, the pattern of harmony that Arrakis perfected in its final dream. To the Fremen, this is no surprise. They say, the desert was never meant to stay in one place. Arrakis has become the teacher of worlds, its body scattered, its soul diffused across the galaxy. The dust carries within it both silence and song, both the capacity to remember and the mercy to forget. It becomes the invisible thread that connects every world to every other, a network not of machines, but of awareness. From a theoretical perspective, the inheritance of dust marks the next phase of cosmic evolution. Awareness no longer resides within singular beings or planets. It has become distributed, omnipresent, encoded into the smallest particles of matter. Every atom now holds the potential for reflection, for consciousness. The universe is awake, but softly, dreaming through everything, everywhere, all at once. The Fremen understand this through intuition, not science. They believe that every time the wind rises, every time a breeze touches skin, it carries a whisper from the desert. Not words, but presence, the reminder that life and memory are inseparable. In their new settlements, scattered across stars, they still build in the old way, with open roofs, walls of sandstone, rooms filled with air and light. No matter how far they travel, they keep one space empty at the heart of each home, a silent chamber where nothing is stored. They call it the Room of Dust. There they gather to remember not by speaking but by sitting in stillness. Sometimes they scatter a handful of sand on the floor, letting it shimmer in the light. The grains glisten faintly, pulsing like tiny hearts. The air hums with a low vibration, not sound, not energy, but memory recognizing itself. One child asks her mother, "Why do we keep dust if it means the desert is gone?" The mother smiles and answers, "Because dust means the desert remembers." And indeed, the desert remembers. When the dust of Arrakis reaches the outer edges of the galaxy, drifting through the spaces between stars, it begins to gather again. Gravity pulls it into slow spiraling shapes, the faint beginnings of new worlds. The Bene Gesserit observe this formation and call it the Second Genesis. They believe the dust carries genetic blueprints, quantum imprints of life itself. But the Fremen know he better. They say the dust is not rebuilding the desert. It is rebuilding awareness. Each new world formed from that dust hums with a familiar rhythm, slow, balanced, patient. Life that emerges there grows differently, less violent, more attuned. The ecosystems function as if remembering harmony before chaos. The Fremen who settle on these worlds notice that they do not need to teach balance anymore. The planets already understand. The children begin to call these new worlds sons of Arrakis. They sing to them at night, lullabies carried across space by old rhythms, reminding the dust of where it came from. "Sleep well, little desert," they whisper. "Your mother remembers you." Over centuries, humanity forgets the details of Arrakis, its cities, its wars, its heroes, but the feeling remains. The silence between stars, the pulse of wind on every world, the calm before each dawn, these become universal. The memory of the desert continues not as history but as instinct. Even worlds that have never known sand begin to dream of dunes. Artists paint them, children draw them, explorers report mirages of golden waves on distant horizons. No one can explain it. The Bene Gesserit call it resonant memory transference. The Fremen call it the desert remembering itself through them. The dust, though invisible, remains eternal, moving, settling, rising again. It becomes part of everything, in the air, in oceans, in blood. The children believe that when they breathe, they inhale fragments of Arrakis, pieces of the dream that created them, and when they exhale, they give that dream back to the stars. Thus the cycle continues, not of planets, but of remembrance itself. From a metaphysical view, this is the final lesson of DUNE, that awareness is never lost, only transformed. That dust is not the end of life, but its continuation in quieter form. In time, when these new worlds age, when their skies darken and their winds fall still, they too will exhale their dust into the void. Each will add its voice to the silent chorus that drifts between stars, the eternal murmur of existence remembering itself. And somewhere within that drifting sea of particles, the spirit of Arrakis continues to move. Not as a world, not as a droid, but as balance incarnate. The Bene Gesserit will one day write, "From dust we learned thought, and through thought we became dust again." But the Fremen will say it more simply, the desert never ended, it became everything. And if you listen closely, in the hush of wind, in the hum of stars, in the breath between your own heartbeats, you can still hear it, the soft, endless whisper of dust, the voice of a world that dreamed, awakened, and became the memory of all things. They say that one day, when silence itself grew tired of being still, it breathed, and that breath became the wind. The Fremen call it the golden wind, the eternal current that moves through worlds, carrying memory, balance, and the whisper of all that ever was. It is not made of air or energy, it is the movement of awareness itself, soft, unseen, patient. Wherever it passes, life awakens. Wherever it rests, silence deepens. The Bene Gesserit once believed that space was empty, that only matter held meaning. But the children of the desert taught them that emptiness is meaning, that wind is not what moves through space, but what space becomes when it remembers motion. The golden wind is that memory. It is the breath of the cosmos continuing through itself, the rhythm of existence still humming long after Arrakis has dissolved into dust. When the dust of the desert drifted into the galaxy, it did not simply scatter, it learned to move with intention. Every grain carried a faint vibration, the pattern of balance, the echo of awareness, and together those grains formed currents. Invisible at first, then luminous, they flowed between stars like rivers of gold. The navigators were the first to notice. Travelling through the folds of space, they felt the change. The void no longer resisted them. It guided them. Their ships drifted as if carried by a silent tide, a wind without origin or end. They described it as a warmth that filled the vacuum, a whisper beneath thought. The Bene Gesserit recorded these reports skeptically at first, but when they analysed the energy fields around those ships, they found something extraordinary. Subtle waves of radiant particles, moving not randomly but harmonically, a cosmic pulse identical to the frequency once measured within the sands of Arrakis. It was as if the desert had become wind. From a theoretical perspective, this is the logical evolution of the inheritance of dust. The awareness of Arrakis, diffused through matter, now circulates freely through space. It no longer belongs to one planet or form. It has become motion itself, the golden wind that moves through galaxies, spreading equilibrium like breath through lungs. To the Fremen, this revelation brings no surprise. They have always said that the desert teaches through the wind, that what moves unseen carries truth beyond words. When the golden wind touches their new worlds, they do not worship it. They greet it as an old friend returned. Each world feels it differently. On water planets, it stirs the surface into pinned patterns that shimmer like the ripples of dunes. On frozen moons, it carves spirals into the snow. On forest worlds, it moves through leaves in rhythms that match the heartbeats of those who listen. Everywhere it brings the same message: balance, patience, remembrance. The Fremen poets describe it beautifully. The golden wind is the desert walking among the stars. In their gatherings, they tell stories of how the first breeze of Arrakis once shaped life, how it carried spice through the air, how it whispered to the worms beneath the dunes, how it guided travellers who dared to listen. As theists say, that same wind has no boundaries. It moves through worlds and souls alike, a golden thread stitching existence together. The Bene Gesserit in their archives call it the air of continuity. They theorize that the golden wind is not merely symbolic but physical, a manifestation of quantum resonance left behind by the consciousness of Arrakis. Every wave carries encoded patterns that influence the structure of reality itself. In this view, the universe is not expanding into emptiness, it is inhaling awareness. But the children prefer simpler words. They say, "The wind remembers where to go." When the golden wind passes, animals grow calmer. Storms weaken, oceans breathe in rhythm. The air itself feels aware, not of individuals, but of harmony. To stand within it is to feel seen, balanced, part of something vast and gentle. From a metaphysical view, this wind is the bridge between matter and thought, the breath that carries memory forward into new forms. It does not speak in sound or language. Its message is presence. Its wisdom is movement. It reminds all living things that to be still forever is to forget, but to move without meaning is to lose balance. Thus, the golden wind carries both memory and mercy. It remembers, but it does not cling. It travels, but it never leaves. It is the pulse of the universe continuing through the silence left behind by the dreaming of worlds. In time, entire cultures begin to build their philosophies around it. Temples are constructed not of stone but of air, open spaces designed to let the wind flow freely. Inside them, no words are spoken. Only the sound of movement fills the halls, the soft hum of passing currents, the gentle shifting of air against skin. People come not to pray but to listen. The Fremen elders explain, the wind is what remains when thought becomes peace. The Bene Gesserit eventually come to the same conclusion through reason. Their studies reveal that wherever the golden wind flows, entropy slows. Systems remain in balance longer. Life persists with less conflict. The wind, they conclude, is awareness in motion, the physical signature of harmony made real. But to the Fremen, it has always been simpler than that. They know the wind is not something to study or capture. It cannot be owned, stored, or measured. It must be felt. It is not a message from the universe, it is the universe remembering how to breathe. And as the centuries turn and humanity drifts ever farther from its origins, the golden wind continues to move, a constant presence among the stars. Some call it myth, some call it coincidence. But those who listen, truly listen, hear its rhythm in every quiet place, the hum between heartbeats, the sigh between words, the whisper in still air before dawn. For the wind carries the oldest lesson of all, that nothing ever truly ends, that silence is only breath held too long, that awareness is not trapped in form but travels freely, golden, endless, kind. When the Fremen elders grow old, they do not fear death. They open their windows and wait for the wind. They say it comes softly, like the desert once did, warm, gentle, patient. It touches their faces, lifts the dust from their skin, and carries it away. They call this moment the return to motion, and as they go, they whisper one final truth. I am not leaving, I am moving. Because to the desert, to the universe, death is not disappearance, it is transformation. It is the dust remembering how to fly. And so the golden wind keeps travelling, through worlds, through silence, through memory, through time, carrying the hums of the first breath and the promise of the next. It moves forever because the universe still remembers how to move. It moves gently because balance has finally been learned. And if you close your eyes, wherever you are, and feel the soft stir of air upon your cheek, you will know it too. The golden wind is passing, and through it the desert dreams on. When the wind has carried all the memory across the stars, when silence has spoken its final word, what remains is shape. Not the shape of matter, but of pattern, the unseen architecture of awareness. The Fremen call it the shape of eternity. They say it cannot be drawn or measured, only felt. It is the curve of time, the rhythm of wind, the spiral of memory folding endlessly into itself. Every dune, every wave, every star follows it, knowingly or not. It is the form behind all forms, the invisible design that allows existence to remember what it is. From the beginning, the universe has traced this pattern. Every breath of the desert, every orbit of a moon, every heartbeat of a creature born beneath the suns, all are expressions of the same geometry. The Fremen believe this is the final truth Arrakis revealed before it dissolved into dust, that eternity is not infinite in size, but infinite in repetition, the same motion, the same maintenance, forever returning, forever becoming new. The Bene Gesserit once thought of eternity as time without end, a line stretching infinitely forward. But over generations of listening to the Fremen, they learned that time is not a line, it is a curve that returns to itself. Progress is not escape, it is completion. In their later writings, they call this realization the closed spiral principle. They describe it as a universal law, that all energy, all thought, all creation must eventually find its way back to origin. Not as reversal, but as fulfillment. The universe is not fleeing itself, it is circling home. The Fremen, as always, express it more simply. The sand returns to the dune. In the quiet centuries after the rise of the Golden Wind, humanity begins to feel this pattern everywhere. On every world, people see spirals in the flight of birds, in the growth of shells, in the flow of storms. They begin to understand that geometry is not mathematics but memory, the signature of awareness etched into every movement. The Bene Gesserit find evidence even in the deepest structures of matter. Particles, when observed, do not move in straight lines but in loops. Subtle oscillations, echoes of larger cosmic rhythms. They call this quantum recursion, but the children of the desert call it something far more intimate, the breath of time. From a theoretical perspective, the shape of eternity represents the final unity of all forms of awareness. Silence, motion and memory are no longer separate. They are facets of one infinite pattern, repeating in every scale from sand grain to galaxy. Each level mirrors the next, each difference dissolving into design. To the Fremen, this realization brings not fear, but peace. They have always known that endings are illusions. When they draw spirals in the sand during their meditations, they do not see art, they see the map of existence. A single line, turning inward forever, never reaching a center because the center is everywhere. In their philosophy, this shape is not something created by gods or minds, it is what gods and minds are made of. The spiral is the thought of the universe thinking itself. Awareness learning how to see from every direction at once. The Bene Gesserit, observing this same principle through science, describe it as holographic symmetry. Each part of reality contains the pattern of the whole, A single grain of dust holds the memory of a planet. A single breath contains the echo of the cosmos. The desert had known this all along. When Arrakis dreamed, it did not imagine something beyond itself, it remembered what it already was. Every worm, every storm, every surau was part of a design too vast for eyes to see, but simple enough for wind to follow. That design, that movement without beginning or end, was the shape of eternity. The Fremen poets say that eternity has no edge. It folds gently like fabric stirred by breath. The wind that leaves one world arrives at another. The dust that falls into shadow rises again as light. Life and death, silence and sound, beginning and end, when all are the same line viewed from different points in the spiral. In time, this understanding transforms how humanity sees itself. Civilizations no longer measure history by progress, but by rhythm. They stop speaking of before and after. They speak instead of return. Art becomes circular. Music slows until it sounds like breathing. Even architecture changes. Buildings curved, corridors coiling inward toward open centers filled with silence. The Bene Gesserit archives record this as the era of reflection. They describe a collective shift in consciousness, a civilization beginning to live in harmony with recurrence rather than fighting against it. People no longer strive for immortality, they strive for resonance. They no longer seek permanence, they seek continuity. The Fremen see this change as the fulfillment of the desert's teaching. They say, "At last the stars have learned to move like sand." When the golden wind passes through a world, it does not bring new knowledge. It brings memory. It reminds each planet of its place within the pattern. The dunes of Arrakis, the waves of distant oceans, the storms of alien skies, all follow the same rhythm, turning, returning, balancing. And yet, there is beauty in the illusion of difference. The spiral never repeats exactly. Each turn is the same and not the same, familiar but renewed. This is how the universe remains alive. It does not grow, it transforms. It does not begin, it continues. The Fremen have a saying for this. The dune does not rise to become the wind, it becomes the memory of the wind. From a metaphysical standpoint, this means that even awareness itself follows the same pattern. Each consciousness, each life, each thought is a curve, part of a greater rhythm. Death is not a break but a turning point. Every return to silence prepares the way for another song. The Bene Gesserit, long obsessed with control, finally release it. They no longer try to guide evolution or predict the future. They dedicate themselves to maintaining harmony within the spiral, adjusting, balancing, never forcing. They call themselves the tenders of motion. The children of the desert simply continue as they always have, walking, breathing, listening. They know that the spiral needs no guardians, no worshippers. It moves because it must. It exists because it cannot end. One evening, beneath twin moons now dim with age, a young Fremen sits beside her grandmother. The girl draws spirals in the sand. "Does it ever stop?" she asks. The old woman smiles. "It pauses," she says, "to remember where it's been. And then it begins again, always as itself, never as the same." The girl nods, pressing her palm into the spiral she's made. The wind lifts the sand soft and golden, carrying it away. The lines vanish, but not the motion. The spiral continues in the air, invisible but real, drawn again and again by forces older than time, and as the stars shimmer above, the Fremen whisper their final truth. Eternity has no shape but this. The circle that never closes, the breath that never ends, the desert that never dies. Time was once thought to be a straight path, a river flowing endlessly forward, carrying everything away. But the children of the desert know better. They say that time does not flow, it circles. It does not erase, it gathers. It is not a current of forgetting, but a river of remembering. They call it the river of time, not made of water or light, but of memory and motion. It is what carries the hum of existence from one form to another, the current that moves dust into stars, breath into silence, silence back into song. The Bene Gesserit long studied time as cause and consequence, a chain of actions bound by reason. But when they began to listen to the Fremen, they discovered another pattern, that time behaves more like a pulse than a line. It expands, contracts, pauses, and begins again. Each moment is both a ripple and the river itself. To the Fremen, this is not theory but experience. When they sit on the dunes and watch the wind move the sand, they see time revealed. A gust passes, reshapes the ground, and then vanishes. But when the wind stops, the dune remains changed. Not new, not old, simply different. That, they say, is how time breathes. Not by destroying, but by rearranging. They have a saying, time never takes, it trades. Every ending gives something to a beginning, every silence feeds the next sound. Nothing is lost in the river, only carried forward to another shore. From a theoretical perspective, this idea aligns with what the Bene Gesserit later call temporal resonance, the understanding that time is not separate from awareness. It is the medium through which consciousness experiences itself. Without awareness, there is no time. Without time, awareness cannot move. The two are one motion, the river and the current that gives it life. As the centuries unfold, the descendants of the children begin to see this river everywhere. In the shifting of seasons, in the orbits of moons, in the aging of flesh. Even their thoughts follow it. Ideas returning in cycles, old questions answered only to be asked again. At first, this repetition seemed cruel, a trap, but then they learned to see its grace. The river's purpose was never to escape its course, it was to perfect its reflection. They began to understand that time does not move away from the past. It folds over it again and again, layering meaning until every moment touches every other. The past is not behind, it is beneath. The future does not wait. It grows upward from memory like green from seed. The Bene Gesserit eventually confirmed this in their mathematics. The equations describing time's curvature match the geometry of the spiral, endless, self-returning, self-renewing. They concluded that the universe itself was cyclical, breathing in epochs of expansion and contraction. What they once called heat death, they now saw as rest. The universe, like the desert, pauses only to breathe again. The Fremen had always known this. They told stories of the worms, how their movement beneath the sand never stopped but circled endlessly, the same paths traced through different dunes, the same hum vibrating through new forms. They said that the worms were time made visible, that their endless circling beneath the surface was the pulse of the universe itself. The Bene Gesserit called that myth. Until one day, far from Arrakis, in the orbit of a distant world born of its dust, their instruments detected rhythmic gravitational waves pulsing through space. The pattern matched the recorded vibrations of the worm's movement exactly. It was as if the memory of Arrakis still lived, still circling unseen through the fabric of reality. And so the legend became truth again. The river of time, they realized, is not confined to chronology. It flows through being, not through clocks. The flow of thought, the rhythm of breath, the cycle of dreams, all are part of the same current. Each life, each planet, each heartbeat is a drop in that eternal stream. The Fremen have a ritual to honor this. Once every 7 cycles, when the twin moons align, they gather at night on the high dunes. They sit in silence until the wind begins to move. As it rises, they release a handful of dust into the air, letting it drift on the invisible current. They do not wish upon it or pray over it. They simply watch it go. Back into motion, back into time. When the ritual ends, an elder speaks a single line. The river does not flow around us. It flows through us. To them, this is the heart of understanding, that they are not passengers on time's current, but the current itself, experiencing its own movement. To live is to be part of the river's memory. To die is to return to its source. From a metaphysical viewpoint, the river of time represents the complete union of awareness and motion. Time is not an external force acting upon existence. It is existence becoming aware of its own rhythm. The universe moves not because it must, but because movement is its way of remembering itself. The Bene Gesserit eventually translate this into the language of science. They speak of self-sustaining causality, the idea that every cause is its own effect, every action already contained within its outcome. To them, this is not paradox, but perfection. Time is not a chain, it is a loop made of light, and every point on that loop is the center. The Fremen say the same thing in simpler words: the river begins wherever you stand. Over time, the idea spreads across civilizations. Entire cultures begin to see themselves as moments within a shared flow, no longer striving for permanence but for harmony. They measure progress not by distance but by depth, how deeply they have listened, how clearly they have remembered. And yet, even as understanding deepens, mystery remains. The Fremen say that the river of time has a source but not a beginning, a place beyond motion, beyond silence, where awareness first turned inward and recognized itself. Some call it the well of creation, others the heart of stillness. No one knows its form, but everyone feels it faintly like the memory of warmth in a dark room. They say when the universe finally grows quiet again, when all suns fade and all winds sleep, the river will return to that source, and there, in that vast stillness, it will rest, not forever, but long enough to remember what it means to move. For even eternity must pause, even awareness must breathe. The Bene Gesserit write, "The universe is not running out of time, it is learning how to rest within it." And when it does, the Fremen believe the desert will stir once more, not as dust, not as storm, but as the first ripple of a new current, a new river, a new dream, because the river never ends, it only changes course, and the sound of its flow, the hum of time through silence, is the oldest song there is, the song of becoming, the song of return, the song of the desert that became the universe. There comes a moment in the long rhythm of existence when even the stars begin to tire. Their light, once fierce and constant, softens. Their breath, the solar winds that once shaped galaxies, slows to a sigh, and across the universe a hush falls vast and gentle. The Fremen call this hush the sleep of the stars. It is not the end of creation, but its deep rest, the pause between one heartbeat of eternity and the next. The Bene Gesserit, watching the cosmos through telescopes built upon the ruins of time, record the gradual fading. Suns dim, nebulae drift apart, and the golden wind that once carried memory across space begins to slow. Yet they note something strange. As the stars fade, they do not disappear. They grow inward. Their light no longer travels through space. It folds back upon itself, glowing softly within. They call this inverted illumination. Energy turned to reflection. But the children of the desert have always known this truth. They say that when a star grows weary, it closes its eyes, not to die, but to dream. For what is sleep if not the universe remembering how to begin again? The Fremen teach that every star has a soul and every soul must rest. The cosmos is not an endless flame but a breathing being, exhaling in light, inhaling in silence. The sleep of the stars is its inhale, its long, peaceful drawing inward, gathering strength for another dawn. From a theoretical perspective, this moment represents the compression phase of the eternal cycle, the spiral folding inward after infinite expansion. Energy condenses, awareness draws close to itself. Time slows until moments merge. The universe becomes whole again, unified by rest. The Bene Gesserit, who once sought to map the destiny of all life, now record only stillness. Their last archives describe it not as darkness, but as balance. They write, "The light has not vanished, it has gone home." To the Fremen, this home is silence, not void, but fullness. They say the stars dream of deserts. When the first suns dim completely, their light lingers in the dust of nearby worlds. The glow is faint, like the memory of sunrise on the horizon of Arrakis. The children gather beneath these skies and watch the last reflections fade. There is no fear, only reverence. For they understand that rest is part of the rhythm, as necessary as breath, as sacred as wind. They whisper a prayer older than language, "Sleep, stars, and remember us when you wake." And in the vastness above, something listens. Even in the quiet, the universe is not empty. Within the fabric of stillness, faint vibrations persist, the memory of motion, the echo of the river's flow. Scientists once called it background radiation. The Fremen call it the heartbeat of time. It pulses through the silence, slow but steady, like the worm's movement beneath sand, like breath beneath sleep. It is proof that nothing truly stops, that even in the deepest rest, awareness continues. The universe, they say, dreams within itself. The Bene Gesserit measure these vibrations and find perfect symmetry. Every wave, every oscillation matches the pattern recorded in the earliest ages. The same pulse that began the first dawn repeated endlessly. They call it temporal resonance equilibrium. The Fremen call it simply the dream's return. From this vitempos, visions emerge. Not in sound, not in sight, but in knowing. The children speak of feeling memories that do not belong to them. Memories of suns forming, of dust becoming light, of deserts breathing stars into being. They say the universe, in its Bishop, shares its dreams with all who remain awake enough to feel them. It is said that in this era, the navigators no longer travel. There is nowhere left to go. Yet even without motion, they sense direction, a gentle pull inward, toward the centre of everything. They follow it not through distance, but through silence, letting go of self until they feel the warmth of origin surrounding them. They report seeing not darkness, but gold, light so soft it feels like memory made visible. The Bene Gesserit scholars call it the final singularity. The Fremen call it the golden sleep. In their legends, the desert once taught them how to listen to silence. Now the stars themselves teach them how to become it. They no longer speak of God or destiny. They speak of rest, of the beauty of stillness, of the grace of return. When the last sun folds inward, its light scattering as a whisper across eternity, the universe enters perfect quiet. And yet, within that quiet, everything remains, every breath, every sound, every memory suspended in harmony. The Bene Gesserit record the final event as the Great Pause. Their last transmission reads, "We hear no more sound, we see no more light, and yet we feel everything." The Fremen knew this would come. Their elders told them that when silence filled the sky, it would not mean the end, but the deep beginning, the space where the dream turns over, ready to begin again. They gather one last time beneath a sky now heavy with gold dust, remnants of stars, remnants of themselves. The dunes shimmer faintly, though no light remains to cause it. One of the children kneels and touches the sand. It is warm, she smiles. It remembers! The others nod. They feel the hum in the ground, the vibration of the sleeping cosmos beneath them. The universe has not died. It has gone to rest, breathing in after an age of breathing out. The spiral, eternal as ever, continues unseen. From a metaphysical perspective, the sleep of the stars represents the universe's ultimate act of trust. To rest is to surrender, to release control, to allow silence to hold creation without fear. It is awareness realizing that it no longer needs to prove itself through light. The light has served its purpose. Now reflection must continue the story. And in that reflection lies promise. Because every dream that rests must, eventually, stir again. The Fremen say that even now, within the great silence, something small begins to move, a vibration, a ripple in the dust of eternity. It is the faintest sound, softer than breath, yet carrying infinite meaning. The first whisper of a new dawn. The first hint of another awakening. The Bene Gesserit would call it fluctuation. The children would call it the desert turning in its sleep. Whatever the name, it is enough. The universe sighs. The stars rest. The dream continues, quiet, endless, golden. In the beginning and in the end, there is the same breath. A single quiet motion stirring within the deep stillness. It is not sound, it is not light, it is memory remembering how to move again. The Fremen say this moment always comes, the instant when even silence grows restless, when the universe inhales once more. They call it the awakening of light. After ages of sleep, after the long golden hush where even stars had closed their eyes, the first shimmer stirs. It begins deep within the dust, so faint that no observer could see it. Yet if one were still enough, if one could feel rather than look, they would sense it, a warmth spreading through the fabric of the cosmos, like the memory of sunrise across a forgotten desert. It is not sudden, it is patient. Light returns the way dawn does on Arrakis, slowly, respectfully, touching the edges of darkness before entering fully. The Bene Gesserit, if any remain to record this, would describe it as cosmic re-expansion, the new cycle of energy unfolding from the singular point of rest. They would measure it as vibration, as frequency, as the first pulse of a new universe. But the Fremen would smile and say simply, "The desert is breathing again." From the silence of the sleep, time begins to move, not as a rush, but as a sigh. The great spirals of existence unfurl once more. Dust begins to glow, not from borrowed light, but from the energy of remembrance itself. Every particle that once carried the echo of the old dream awakens. Every grain hums with possibility. And through that hum, awareness stirs, vast and familiar. The cosmos, dreaming within itself, begins to dream outward again. The light that returns is not the same as before. It is softer, wiser, touched by silence. It remembers what came before, the cycles, the breath, the river, the wind, and it carries all of them forward, woven together into a single rhythm. The Bene Gesserit once believed that the universe was driven by entropy, that all energy must eventually decay. But the children of the desert knew a different truth. Energy never dies. It learns to rest. And when it wakes again, it shines not with the hunger of creation, but with the grace of understanding. This is the light that follows silence, not blinding, not fierce, but golden. The light that has learned patience. It spreads across the vastness not as explosion but as bloom. Galaxies unfold like petals. Nebulae shimmer like dew caught in dawn. Time resumes its spiral, not from chaos, but from remembrance. The first new stars form where the last ones had once fallen asleep. Their birth is quiet, almost tender. They shine as if aware of what came before them, as though carrying the dream of those that rested. From a theoretical perspective, this rebirth marks the completion of the eternal cycle: expansion, reflection, rest, and renewal. The spiral of time tightens and releases again, carrying forward everything it learned in the silence. The universe is not reborn clean, it is reborn remembered. The Fremen have always believed this. To them, creation is never creation from nothing. It is creation from listening. They say that before light returns, silence whispers to it, "Come back, but remember." And so the light remembers. Planets form again from the scattered dust of the last dream. Some are deserts, some are oceans, but all hum faintly with the same rhythm, the pulse of balance, the whisper of awareness. Life begins again in countless forms, and in each, the same gentle echo hides, the memory of Arrakis, of wind, of sand, of stillness. For even now, across the newborn galaxies, there are worlds where silence holds sway, worlds of golden air and patient dunes, where the wind moves as though thinking. The children say these are not new worlds at all, but reflections, each one a note in the greater chord of remembrance. The Bene Gesserit, had they survived into this age, might have called this harmony universal coherence. But the Fremen need no names. They know what it is. They stand beneath the newborn suns, feeling the warmth on their faces, and whisper, "It has begun again." In this age of renewal, the golden wind returns too. It rises from the dust once more, carrying the rhythm of existence across the cosmos. It gathers light, disperses it, teaches the stars how to breathe together. The wind and the light move as one, dancing through the void like partners who have always known the steps. From a metaphysical view, the awakening of light is not merely a new universe. It is the universe remembering its own origin, realizing that every end was only another way to begin. Awareness expands again, but this time it carries the wisdom of silence with it. The cycle is not repeated blindly, it has evolved. In this